Relax with stories that help you sleep, work, and calm your mind. Today's story is called Anniversary Night. We invite you to listen and support our channel by clicking subscribe and receiving channel notifications to conveniently follow the next videos. Sincerely, thank you. The late afternoon sun spilled through the wide windows of Emily Nguyen's San Diego apartment, casting golden streaks across the hardwood floor. The space was a reflection of a blend of eclectic charm and untamed creativity. Polaroid photos hung on a string above the couch, capturing fleeting moments. Emily's windswept hair at La Jolla Cove, Julian's half-smile as he sketched at Balboa Park, their hands entwined under a starlit sky. The air smelled faintly of jasmine from a candle she lit earlier, mingling with the briny tang of the nearby Pacific Ocean that always seemed to cling to her skin. Emily stood in front of her full-length mirror, her reflection framed by the soft glow of fairy lights draped around the frame. At 26, she was a vision of effortless allure, though she rarely saw it herself. Her Vietnamese heritage gifted her with smooth, sun-kissed skin that seemed to shimmer under the light, and her almond-shaped eyes, dark as obsidian, held a spark of mischief and vulnerability. Her body was lithe, yet curved in all the right places, her waist narrow, her hips flaring gently, her legs long and toned from years of chasing the perfect shot through rugged coastal trails. She ran her fingers through her shoulder-length black hair, letting it fall in loose waves that framed her heart-shaped face. Tonight, she wanted to feel like the woman she often hid, the one who wasn't afraid to want, to crave, to demand. She adjusted the thin straps of her silk camisole, the fabric clinging to her curves like a second skin, accentuating the gentle swell of her breasts and the subtle dip of her collarbone. Her lips, full and naturally rosy, curved into a nervous smile as she thought of Julian. 3 years. 3 years of love that had grown deep, steady, but perhaps too safe. They'd built a life together, shared coffee at dawn, late-night talks about dreams, quiet Sundays tangled in bed. But somewhere along the way, they'd stopped pushing boundaries, stopped peeling back the layers of their desires. Tonight, she wanted to change that. Across town, Julian Brooks sat in his minimalist office at a downtown architecture firm, his desk cluttered with blueprints and charcoal sketches. At 28, he was the kind of man who turned heads without trying. Quiet intensity radiated from him, like a storm brewing beneath a calm sea. His features were sharp, yet warm. High cheekbones, a strong jaw dusted with a hint of stubble, and hazel eyes that seemed to see straight through you. His dark hair was perpetually tousled, as if he'd just run his hands through it while lost in thought. His body was lean but muscular, the result of early morning runs along Coronado Beach and weekends spent hiking with Emily. Today, he wore a fitted navy button-down that hugged his broad shoulders and tapered down to his narrow waist, the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with quiet strength. Julian's mind wasn't on the sleek building designs in front of him. It was on Emilion, the way her laugh could light up a room, the way her touch made his pulse race, the way she sometimes held back, as if afraid to show him all of herself. He loved her fiercely, but he knew their relationship had settled into a rhythm that felt too predictable. Tonight was their 3rd anniversary, and he wanted it to be more than flowers or a fancy dinner. He wanted it to be raw, reala, night where they could both let go of their inhibitions and rediscover each other. He leaned back in his chair, his fingers tracing the edge of a small velvet box he'd tucked into his pocket. Not a ring, not yet, but a token of his commitment to her, to them. He'd planned this night carefully, not with reservations or gifts, but with a promise. His lips curved into a slow, almost wicked smile as he imagined her reaction. Emily, with her fiery spirit and hidden depths, was about to meet a side of him she'd only glimpsed in stolen moments. Back at the apartment, Emily paced barefoot across the cool floor, her toes curling against the wood. Her phone buzzed on the counter, and she glanced at the screen of text from Julian. Home in 20. Wear something that makes you feel unstoppable. Her breath caught, a thrill racing down her spine. She knew that tone, rare but unmistakable, the one that promised something dangerous and delicious. She crossed to her closet, her fingers brushing over dresses and tops before settling on a garment she'd bought on a whim months ago and never dared to wear, a deep red satin dress, sleek and daring, that she knew would drive him wild. As she slipped into it, the fabric cascaded over her body like liquid, molding to every curve. The dress was sleeveless, with a plunging neckline that revealed just enough to tease, and a hem that skimmed her thighs, showing off her legs. She turned in front of the mirror, her heart pounding. The dress made her feel like a siren, like the kind of woman who could command a room or a man with a single glance. She dabbed a touch of perfume behind her ears, the scent warm and sensual, and let her hair fall loose, framing her face in soft waves. Her lips, now painted a bold crimson, parted slightly as she whispered to her reflection, "Tonight, no holding back." The door clicked open, and Julian stepped inside, his presence filling the small space. He paused in the doorway, his eyes locking onto her, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. His gaze traveled over her, slow and deliberate, taking in the way the dress hugged her hips, the way her collarbone gleamed under the candlelight, the way her eyes burned with a mix of defiance and desire. He felt a heat coil low in his stomach, his pulse quickening. She was breathtaking, not just beautiful but alive, a force he wanted to worship and unravel all at once. "Emily," he said, his voice low, almost a growl as he crossed the room to her. He stopped, just inches away, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, smell the faint cedar wood of his cologne. His hand lifted, his fingers brushing lightly along her jaw, tilting her face up to meet his gaze. "You look like every fantasy I've ever had." Her lips parted, a soft laugh escaping her, but there was no mistaking the flush creeping up her neck, the way her breath hitched. "And you," she murmured, her eyes tracing the sharp lines of his face, the way his shirt stretched across his chest, hinting at the taut muscles beneath. "You look like trouble." He grinned, a rare, boyish flash of mischief that made her heart skip. "Good, because tonight, we're not playing it safe." He stepped closer, his hands settling on her waist, his thumbs brushing the satin over her hips. The touch was light but electric, sending a shiver through her. No gifts, no restaurants, no distractions, just us and a promise. Her brows lifted, curiosity sparking in her eyes. "A promise?" He leaned in, his lips brushing her ear, his breath warm against her skin. "Tonight, you get to do whatever you want. Anything, no limits, no judgment, and I get the same." His voice was a velvet caress, laced with a challenge that made her pulse race. "What do you say, Em? Are you in?" She pulled back, just enough to meet his gaze, her eyes searching his. There was no hesitation in him, only a fierce, unspoken invitation to trust him, to dive into the unknown together. Her fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her touch. She felt a surge of courage, a desire to shed the cautious skin she'd worn for too long. "I'm in," she whispered, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "But, Julian," she leaned up, her lips hovering just shy of his, her breath mingling with his. "Don't expect me to go easy on you." His laugh was low, rich, and full of promise. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm counting on it." As the candles flickered around them, casting shadows that danced across the walls, Emily felt something shift inside Hera's spark, igniting, a door creaking open. Tonight wasn't just an anniversary. It was a beginning, a chance to explore the parts of themselves they'd kept hidden, to rewrite the rules of their love. And as Julian's hand slid up her spine, pulling her closer, she knew one thing for certain. Whatever happened next, it would be unforgettable. The night stretched before them, heavy with possibility, and Emily's heart raced with a heady mix of anticipation and desire. She looked at Julian, at the man who knew her better than anyone, and felt a thrill at the thought of discovering him all over again. Tonight, they would be fearless. Tonight, they would be free. The San Diego night draped itself over Emily and Julian's apartment like a lover's embrace, the city's distant pulse softening to a whisper beyond the walls. Inside, the small living room was a world unto itself, a cocoon of warmth and desire woven from flickering candlelight and the low, sultry hum of a jazz playlist. Candles, dozens of them, lined the bookshelves, clustered on the coffee table, and glowed from the windowsill, their flames dancing in the dimness, casting golden shadows that swayed like lovers in a slow waltz. The air was rich with the scent of jasmine and sandalwood, laced with the faint, briny kiss of the Pacific Ocean drifting through a cracked window. A bottle of red wine sat on the table, its deep crimson catching the light, two empty glasses beside it, their rims still wet from the first sip. Emily stood in the heart of the room, her bare feet sinking into the plush cream rug, her body a vision of elegance and allure in the deep red satin dress she'd chosen for the night. The fabric clung to her like a second skin, shimmering in the candlelight, molding to the gentle curve of her breasts, the narrow dip of her waist, and the flare of her hips that seemed designed for Julian's hands. Her skin, a warm golden hue kissed by the California sun, glowed as if lit from within, her collarbone a delicate ridge that begged to be kissed, her long, toned legs revealed by the dress's daring Hema testament to her strength and grace from years of chasing sunsets with her camera. Her shoulder-length black hair fell in loose waves, framing her heart-shaped face, where her obsidian eyes sparkled with a heady mix of anticipation and defiance. Her full lips, painted a bold crimson, parted slightly, her breath shallow, as she felt the weight of Julian's gaze. Julian stood across the room, his presence a quiet storm, commanding without effort. His navy button-down was unbuttoned at the collar, revealing a tantalizing glimpse of his strong chest, the fabric stretched taut across his broad shoulders and tapering to his narrow waist. His dark hair was tousled, a single lock falling over his forehead, and his hazel eyes burned with a hunger that made Emily's pulse race. His forearms, bared by rolled-up sleeves, were corded with muscle, his hands, strong yet gentle, capable of sketching intricate blueprints or unraveling her with a single touch. He moved with a predator's grace, his eyes locked on her, as if she were the only star in his sky. The air between them crackled, thick with the promise they'd met no limits, no judgment, just the raw, unfiltered truth of their desires. Julian crossed the room, his steps deliberate, stopping just close enough for Emily to feel the heat radiating from his body, to catch the faint cedarwood and citrus of his cologne. His gaze roamed over her, slow and deliberate, drinking in every detail, the way the satin hugged her hips, the way her chest rose and fell with each breath, the way her lips trembled with unspoken want. He felt a primal urge stir within him, a need to pull her close, to claim her, but he held back, letting the tension build like a crescendo in the music around them. "Emily," he said, his voice low and rough, like a wave breaking against the shore. "You're breathtaking." The word felt inadequate, but the way he said it, the way his eyes darkened with desire, made her feel like a goddess, worshipped and craved in equal measure. She tilted her head, a playful smile curving her lips, though her heart pounded so fiercely she was sure he could hear it. "And you," she murmured, her voice a soft, sultry tease, "look like you're planning something wicked." Her eyes traced the sharp lines of his jaw, the way his shirt hinted at the lean muscle beneath, and a warmth pooled low in her belly. She wanted to reach out, to run her fingers along the stubble on his cheek, to feel the heat of his skin, but she held herself still, savoring the delicious ache of anticipation. He stepped closer, closing the gap until only inches separated them, his hand lifted, his fingers brushing the thin strap of her dress, the touch so light it sent a shiver racing down her spine. "Wicked?" he repeated, his lips twitching into a half smile that was equal parts charm and danger. "Maybe, but only if you're ready for it." His thumb grazed her collarbone, tracing its delicate curve, and her breath hitched, her body leaning into his touch instinctively. "I'm ready," she whispered, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside her. She reached up, her fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt, feeling the steady thrum of his heartbeat beneath her touch. "But first," she leaned in, her lips hovering just shy of his, her breath warm against his skin. "Tell me what you want, Julian. No holding back." His eyes flashed, a spark of something wild igniting in their depths. He cupped her face, his hands warm and sure, his thumbs brushing the edges of her lips. "I want you," he said, his voice dropping to a near growl. "All of you. The parts you show me, the parts you hide. I want to see you let go, Em. I want to feel you unravel." His words were a confession, a plea, and a promise, and they sent a thrill through her, her skin tingling with the weight of his desire. She swallowed, her throat tight, her body alive with a mix of nerves and excitement. She'd always been careful with him, guarding the edges of her fantasies, afraid they might shift the way he saw her. But tonight, under the flickering candlelight, with his eyes locked on hers, she felt a surge of courage. She wanted to be bold, to be the woman who took what she wanted, who gave as fiercely as she received. "Then let's start," she said, her voice low and laced with newfound confidence. She stepped back, just enough to break his touch, and reached for the bottle of wine on the table. The movement was deliberate, her hips swaying slightly, the satin catching the light as she moved. She poured 2 glasses, the liquid dark and rich, and handed one to him, her fingers brushing his in a fleeting, electric touch. "To us," she said, raising her glass, her eyes never leaving his, to a night where nothing is off limits. He clinked his glass against hers, the sound sharp in the quiet room. "To us?" he echoed, his voice thick with promise. They drank, the wine warm and heady, its taste lingering on their tongues like a shared secret. As they set their glasses down, Julian took her hand, his grip firm but gentle, and led her to the couch, where a nest of cushions and a soft throw waited. He sat, pulling her down beside him, but instead of kissing her, he turned her so her back was to him, her body nestled between his legs. His hands settled on her shoulders, his thumbs brushing the bare skin at the nape of her neck, and she felt a shiver ripple through her. "Relax," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "Let me take care of you first." His fingers began to knead her shoulders, slow and deliberate, working out the tension she hadn't realized she was carrying. His touch was both soothing and electrifying, each press of his hands sending waves of warmth through her. She let her head fall back, her eyes fluttering closed, her body melting into his. The satin dress shifted slightly, the hem riding up her thighs, exposing more of her smooth, golden skin, and she felt his breath catch, his hands pausing for a fraction of a second before resuming their rhythm. "You're so beautiful," he whispered, his lips brushing the shell of her ear, his voice a low, intimate caress. "Every inch of you." His hands slid down her arms, his fingers tracing the curve of her elbows, the delicate bones of her wrists, before returning to her shoulders. He leaned forward, his chest pressing against her back, and she could feel the heat of him, the steady beat of his heart, the strength in his frame that made her feel both safe and utterly desired. She turned her head, just enough to meet his gaze, her lips parting as she spoke. "Julian," she said, her voice soft but firm, "I want something." The words felt bold, almost reckless, but the way his eyes darkened, the way his hands tightened on her arms, told her he was listening, waiting, eager. "Tell me," he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her. "Anything." She hesitated for a heartbeat, her cheeks flushing, but the candlelight, the wine, the weight of his touch gave her the courage to speak. She turned fully to face him, straddling his lap in one fluid motion, the satin dress riding higher, her thighs bracketing his. His hands settled on her hips, his fingers digging into the soft flesh, and she felt a jolt of heat at the contact. She leaned in, her lips brushing his ear, her voice a sultry whisper. "I want to be tied up." The words hung in the air, charged with a raw, vulnerable honesty. For a moment, Julian was still, his eyes searching hers, as if gauging the depth of her desire. Then a slow, wicked smile spread across his face, and he pulled her closer, his lips grazing her jaw. "Oh, he murmured, his voice thick with arousal. "You have no idea how much I want that too." He stood, lifting her effortlessly, her legs wrapping around his waist as he carried her to the bedroom. The room was dimly lit, more candles casting a golden glow over the bed, where a pile of silk scarves and a small velvet bag waited items they'd both agreed to have on hand, a silent acknowledgement of the night's possibilities. He set her down gently, her feet sinking into the soft rug, and stepped back, his eyes raking over her with a hunger that made her knees weak. "Take off the dress," he said, his voice low and commanding, a tone she'd never heard from him before, but one that sent a thrill through her. She obeyed, her fingers trembling slightly as she reached for the straps, letting the satin slide down her body to pool at her feet. She stood before him in nothing but a pair of black lace panties, her skin glowing in the candlelight, her breasts full and soft, her nipples hardening under his gaze. Her body was a masterpiece, curved, yet strong, delicate, yet powerful, every inch of her a testament to her beauty. Julian's breath hitched, his eyes darkening as he took her in. "God, Emily," he said, his voice rough with want. "You're perfect." He stepped closer, his fingers trailing down her arms, raising goosebumps in their wake. He picked up a silk scarf, the fabric cool and smooth, and held it up, his eyes meeting hers. "Are you sure?" She nodded, her lips parting, her voice a whisper. "I trust you." He smiled, a mix of tenderness and desire, and guided her to the bed, where she lay back against the pillows. He took her wrists, his touch gentle but firm, and looped the scarf around them, tying them to the headboard with a knot that was secure but not tight. The sensation of being bound, of surrendering control, sent a rush of adrenaline through her, her body humming with anticipation. She tested the bonds, the silk soft against her skin, and felt a surge of excitement at the slight restraint. Julian knelt beside her, his eyes tracing every inch of the curve of her neck, the rise and fall of her chest, the way her thighs pressed together in a mix of nerves and need. He leaned down, his lips brushing her forehead, her cheek, the corner of her mouth, each kiss a promise of what was to come. "You're safe with me," he whispered, his breath warm against her skin. "Always." And then he began, his hands and lips exploring her with a reverence that bordered on worship. He kissed the hollow of her throat, his tongue tracing the delicate skin, and she arched into him, a soft moan escaping her lips. His hands roamed lower, cupping her breasts, his thumbs brushing her nipples until they ached, her body trembling under his touch. He moved down, his lips trailing a path across her stomach, his teeth grazing the sensitive skin just above her panties, and she gasped, her hips lifting instinctively. "Julian," she breathed, her voice a plea, a prayer, a demand. She felt exposed, vulnerable, but also powerful, knowing that every sound she made, every movement was driving him as wild as he was driving her. He looked up, his eyes meeting hers, a wicked glint in their depths. "We're just getting started," he said, his voice a low, dangerous promise. And as the candles burned lower, casting long shadows across the room, Emily knew that this night was only the beginning of a journey into a place where desire knew no bounds, where love was both a surrender and a conquest, and where they would emerge changed, forever bound by the truths they dared to share. The night stretched on, each moment a revelation, each touch a step deeper into the unknown. And as Julian's hands moved over her, as her body responded with a fire she'd never known, Emily felt herself unraveling not just in pleasure but in trust, in love, in the certainty that with him, she could be everything she'd ever wanted to be. The bedroom was a haven of shadows and secrets, bathed in the golden flicker of candles that lined the nightstand and dresser, their flames trembling as if mirroring the pulse of the night. The air was thick with the scent of melted wax, jasmine, and the faint musk of desire, a heady cocktail that wrapped around Emily and Julian like a lover's embrace. The San Diego night pressed against the windows, the distant crash of waves from the nearby coast, a soft, rhythmic counterpoint to the sultry jazz that drifted from the living room, its notes now a low, throbbing undercurrent to the scene unfolding within. The bed, draped in crisp white linens, was a stage for their revelations, the silk scarves and velvet bag on the nightstand silent witnesses to the boundaries they were about to cross. Emily lay on the bed, her wrists still bound loosely to the headboard by the silk scarf, the fabric cool and smooth against her skin. Her body was a vision of raw, unfiltered beauty, glowing in the candlelighter's sun-kissed skin, a canvas of golden warmth, her curves both delicate and powerful. Her breasts, full and soft, rose and fell with each shallow breath, her nipples taut from Julian's earlier touch, a silent plea for more. Her waist dipped gracefully, flaring into hips that seemed sculpted for his hands, and her long toned legs were parted slightly, the black lace panties clinging to her like a whispered promise. Her dark hair spilled across the pillow, a cascade of midnight waves framing her heart-shaped face, where her obsidian eyes burned with a mix of vulnerability and defiance. Her lips, still crimson from the wine, parted as she watched Julian, her breath catching at the intensity in his gaze. Julian knelt beside her, his presence a quiet storm, his navy button-down now unbuttoned halfway, revealing the lean, muscular planes of his chest, dusted with a faint trail of dark hair that disappeared beneath his waistband. His hazel eyes, flecked with gold in the candlelight, held a hunger that made her pulse race, tempered by a tenderness that grounded her. His dark hair was tousled, a lock falling over his forehead, and his strong jaw was shadowed with stubble that begged to be touched. His forearms, bared by rolled-up sleeves, flexed with quiet strength, his hands capable of drafting intricate designs or unraveling her with a single caress resting on his thighs as he studied her. He was a masterpiece of restraint and desire, his body taut with anticipation, every muscle coiled as if ready to spring, yet his touch remained deliberate, reverent. The air between them was electric, charged with the weight of Emily's confession, "I want to be tied up," and the unspoken desires still waiting to be voiced. Julian's eyes never left hers, his gaze a tether that held her in place as surely as the scarf around her wrists. He leaned forward, his fingers brushing a stray lock of hair from her face, the touch so light it sent a shiver racing down her spine. "You're incredible," he murmured, his voice a low, gravelly caress that vibrated through her. "So brave, so beautiful." His words were a balm to the vulnerability she felt, exposed and bound before him. Yet they also stoked the fire in her core, a reminder of the power she held in her surrender. She tilted her head, her lips curving into a small, teasing smile, though her heart pounded with a mix of nerves and excitement. "Your turn," she whispered, her voice soft but laced with challenge. "You said anything, Julian? What do you want?" Her eyes searched his, daring him to match her courage, to peel back the layers of his own restraint. His smile was slow, almost predatory, a glint of mischief in his eyes that made her breath hitch. He reached for the velvet bag on the nightstand, pulling out a small glass box, its surface catching the candlelight like a prism. Inside were slips of paper, blank and waiting, a ritual they'd agreed on earlier away to confess their hidden desires without the weight of immediate judgment. He set the box between them, his fingers lingering on its edge, and met her gaze. "Let's make it real," he said, his voice thick with promise. "We write down what we want, what we've never dared to say, no limits, then we choose." Her pulse quickened, a thrill racing through her at the intimacy of the act, the trust it required. She nodded, her lips parting slightly. "Okay," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Untie me." He hesitated, his eyes flicking to the scarf, as if reluctant to release her, but then he leaned forward, his fingers deftly untying the knot. The silk slid away, leaving her wrists free, and she flexed them, feeling a rush of freedom, tinged with the lingering thrill of restraint. She sat up, the sheet falling to her waist, exposing her breasts to the cool air, her skin prickling under his gaze. He handed her a pen and a slip of paper, his fingers brushing hers in a fleeting, electric touch that sent a jolt through her. They sat facing each other, the glass box between them, the candlelight casting their shadows against the wall. Emily's heart raced as she held the pen, her mind swirling with fantasies she'd buried, deep desires she'd never voiced, even to herself. She glanced at Julian, his expression a mix of anticipation and encouragement, and felt a surge of courage. She wrote quickly, the words spilling onto the paper in her elegant, looping script, each letter a confession of a part of herself she'd kept hidden. She folded the paper, her fingers trembling slightly, and dropped it into the box, the soft clink of glass, a signal of her commitment. Julian watched her, his eyes darkening with each movement, as if the act of her writing was as intimate as a touch. He took his own slip of paper, his pen moving with deliberate precision, his jaw tight with focus. When he finished, he folded the paper and placed it in the box, his gaze meeting hers, a silent acknowledgement of the trust they were building. They added a few more slips, each one a secret, a desire, a piece of themselves laid bare. He reached into the box first, his fingers brushing the papers before selecting one. He unfolded it, his eyes scanning the words, and a slow, wicked smile spread across his face. "This is yours," he said, his voice low and teasing, holding the paper just out of her reach. "Want to hear it?" Her cheeks flushed, but she nodded, her curiosity outweighing her nerves. "Read it," she said, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. He leaned closer, his lips brushing her ear as he read, his voice a sultry whisper. "I want to be in control, completely. I want you to surrender to me." The words hung in the air, bold and unapologetic, and Emily felt a rush of heat, both at the revelation and at the way his voice wrapped around them, making them feel alive. She swallowed, her eyes meeting his, a spark of defiance in their depths. "Is that so?" she murmured, her lips curving into a playful smile. "Then maybe it's my turn to choose." She reached into the box, her fingers trembling slightly as she selected a slip of paper. She unfolded it, her breath catching as she read his handwriting, strong and precise. "I want to see you take charge," she read aloud, her voice soft but laced with excitement. "I want you to own me, Em. Every part of me." The confession sent a thrill through her, a mix of power and vulnerability that made her head spin. She looked at him, his eyes burning with a mix of desire and trust, and felt a surge of confidence. "Looks like we're on the same page," she said, her voice low and teasing, a wicked glint in her eyes. He laughed, a rich, warm sound that filled the room, easing the tension for a moment. "Then let's see what you've got," he said, leaning back against the headboard, his body relaxed but his eyes locked on her, daring her to take the lead. Emily felt a rush of adrenaline, her body humming with anticipation. She slid off the bed, standing before him, her near-naked form a vision, in the candlelighter skin glowing, her curves a symphony of strength and softness, her eyes blazing with intent. She reached for the velvet bag, pulling out a pair of soft leather cuffs, their surface smooth and cool. She held them up, her lips curving into a mischievous smile. "Your turn to surrender," she said, her voice a sultry command that sent a shiver through him. Julian's eyes darkened, his breath hitching as he held out his wrists. A silent agreement to her terms. She moved closer, her fingers deft as she fastened the cuffs, the leather snug but not tight, a symbol of his trust in her. She guided him to lie back, securing the cuffs to the headboard, her movements deliberate, each touch a caress that stoked the fire between them. When she was done, she stepped back, admiring her workie's strong, muscular body stretched out before her, his chest rising and falling with each breath, his eyes burning with a mix of anticipation and desire. "You're gorgeous," she murmured, her voice thick with want as she climbed onto the bed, straddling his hips. Her hands roamed over his chest, her fingers tracing the hard planes of muscle, the faint scars from childhood adventures, the trail of hair that led lower. His skin was warm, taut, a canvas of strength and vulnerability that made her heart ache with love and her body throb with need. She leaned down, her lips brushing his, a teasing, fleeting kiss that left him straining for more. "Emily," he growled, his voice rough with arousal, his body tensing as she trailed her lips down his jaw, her teeth grazing the stubble, her tongue flicking against the sensitive skin of his neck. She felt powerful, alive, every touch a declaration of her desire, every response from him a gift. She kissed her way down his chest, her hands exploring, her nails lightly scraping his skin, drawing a low moan from his lips that sent a jolt of heat through her. She paused, her lips hovering just above his waistband, her eyes meeting his. "Tell me what you want," she whispered, echoing his earlier words, her voice a sultry challenge, no holding back. His eyes flashed, a mix of defiance and surrender. "I want you," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I want you to take me apart, Em. I want to feel you everywhere." The words ignited something in her, a fire that burned away any lingering doubts. She slid lower, her hands deft as she unbuttoned his pants, her movements slow and deliberate, savoring the way his body tensed, the way his breath hitched. She peeled the fabric away, revealing the hard lines of his hips, the taut muscles of his thighs, the evidence of his desire straining against the thin fabric of his boxers. Her fingers brushed against him, a teasing touch that drew a sharp intake of breath, his hips lifting instinctively. She smiled, a wicked glint in her eyes, and leaned down, her lips brushing the sensitive skin just above his waistband, her breath warm against him. "Patience," she murmured, her voice a low, teasing purr. She wanted to draw this out, to make him feel every moment, to show him the depth of her desire. Her hands roamed higher, tracing the ridges of his abs, the curve of his ribs, while her lips followed, kissing and nipping, each touch a spark that built the tension between them. Julian's hands flexed against the cuffs, the leather creaking softly, his body a live wire under her touch. He groaned, his voice thick with need. "You're killing me." She laughed, a soft, sultry sound that filled the room, and climbed back up to straddle him, her thighs bracketing his hips, her hands braced on his chest. "Good," she whispered, leaning down to kiss him, her lips claiming his in a deep, hungry kiss that left them both breathless. Her tongue danced with his, a slow, sensual rhythm that mirrored the music, her body pressing against his, the lace of her panties a thin barrier between them. The kiss deepened, a collision of want and trust, their bodies moving together instinctively. She felt his heart pounding beneath her hands, felt the heat of him, the strength, the vulnerability, and knew that this moment was more than physical. It was a language, a confession, a vow. She pulled back, her lips swollen, her eyes locked on his, and saw the same truth reflected in his gaze. "I love you," she whispered, her voice soft but fierce, the words a lifeline in the storm of their desire. "I love you," he echoed, his voice rough with emotion, his eyes burning with a love that was as fierce as it was tender. She reached for the glass box again, pulling out another slip of paper, her fingers trembling with anticipation. She unfolded it, her breath catching as she read the words, a new desire that pushed the boundaries even further. She looked at him, her lips curving into a smile that was equal parts mischief and promise. "Ready for more?" she asked, her voice a sultry whisper. His laugh was low, rich, a sound that wrapped around her like a caress. "With you?" he said, his eyes blazing with trust and desire. "Always." And as the candles burned lower, their light casting long, flickering shadows across the room, Emily felt the night stretch before them, a canvas for their desires, a testament to their love. They were no longer just Emily and Julian, lovers of 3 years. They were explorers, adventurers, bound by a trust that allowed them to be their truest selves. The glass box held more secrets, more confessions, and as Emily leaned down to kiss him again, she knew that each one would bring them closer, deeper, into a love that was as wild as it was true. The night was far from over, and with every touch, every whisper, they were rewriting the story of their love, one desire at a time. The bedroom was a cocoon of heat and shadow, the candlelight now a soft, wavering glow as the wicks burned low, casting long, flickering patterns across the walls. The air was thick with the scent of melted wax, jasmine, and the raw, intimate musk of their shared desire, a fragrance that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of their breaths. Outside, the San Diego night was a distant hum, the faint crash of waves against the shore, a soothing undercurrent to the sultry jazz that still played, its notes now a low, sensual murmur, like a heartbeat in the quiet. The bed, its white linens rumpled and warm, bore the imprint of their bodies, a testament to the boundaries they'd crossed and the truths they'd uncovered. The glass box on the nightstand, still holding a few unopened slips of paper, gleamed faintly, a silent promise of more to come. Emily knelt on the bed, her body a vision of radiant beauty in the candlelight. Her sun-kissed skin shimmered, a golden canvas that seemed to drink in the light, her curves both delicate and commanding, her breasts full and soft, their gentle rise and fall a hypnotic rhythm, her nipples still taut from Julian's touch. Her waist dipped gracefully, flaring into hips that curved like an artist's dream, her long, toned legs folded beneath her, the black lace panties clinging to her like a whispered secret. Her dark hair, now slightly tousled, spilled over her shoulders in waves, framing her heart-shaped face, where her obsidian eyes glowed with a mix of fire and vulnerability. Her lips, swollen from kisses and still faintly crimson, parted as she caught her breath, her gaze locked on Julian, her heart racing with the intensity of the moment. Julian lay before her, his wrists freed from the leather cuffs, his body a study in strength and surrender. His navy button-down was gone, discarded in the heat of their earlier explorations, revealing the lean, muscular planes of his chest, dusted with a faint trail of dark hair that led lower, disappearing beneath the waistband of his boxers. His hazel eyes, flecked with gold in the dim light, burned with a hunger that made her pulse quicken. tempered by a tenderness that anchored her. His dark hair was tousled, a lock falling over his forehead, and his strong jaw, shadowed with stubble, begged to be touched. His forearms, corded with muscle, rested at his sides, his hands capable of sketching intricate designs or unraveling her with a single caress clenched slightly, as if fighting the urge to reach for her. His body was taut, every muscle defined, a testament to his quiet power, yet his vulnerability in this moment made him all the more irresistible. The air between them was alive, charged with the weight of their confessions, the desires they'd written and shared, each one a step deeper into the uncharted territory of their love. The leather cuffs and silk scarves lay discarded on the bed. Their purpose served, but the intimacy they'd fostered lingered, a thread that bound them closer than ever. Emily's body still hummed from the thrill of taking control, of watching Julian surrender to her, his moans and whispered pleas a symphony that echoed in her core. But now, as their eyes met, she felt a shift in need, not just for pleasure, but for connection, for the raw, unguarded truth of their emotions. Julian sat up, his movements slow and deliberate, his gaze never leaving hers. He reached for her, his hand cupping her face, his thumb brushing the curve of her cheek, the touch so tender it made her heart ache. "Em," he murmured, his voice low and rough, like a wave breaking against the shore. "You're everything." The words were simple, but the way he said them, the way his eyes searched hers, made them feel like a vow, a declaration that stripped away any lingering doubts. She leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed for a moment, savoring the warmth of his hand, the steadiness of his presence. "Julian," she whispered, her voice soft but thick with emotion. She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze, and felt a surge of vulnerability, a need to lay bare not just her body but her soul. She shifted closer, her thighs brushing his, the lace of her panties a thin barrier between them, and placed her hands on his chest, feeling the steady thrum of his heartbeat beneath her palms. "There's something I need to say." His brows lifted slightly, curiosity and concern flickering in his eyes, but he nodded, his hand sliding to her waist, his fingers resting lightly against her skin. "Anything," he said, his voice a low, encouraging rumble. "You know you can tell me anything." She swallowed, her throat tight, her heart pounding with the weight of what she was about to confess. The candlelight cast soft shadows across his face, highlighting the sharp lines of his jaw, the warmth in his eyes, and she felt a rush of love so fierce it stole her breath. She leaned in, her lips brushing his in a fleeting, tender kiss, a prelude to the words she needed to speak. "Sometimes," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I feel like I'm not enough for you. Like if I show you too much of what I want, who I am, you'll see me differently. Like I'll be too much, or not what you expect." The confession hung in the air, raw and vulnerable, a piece of her heart laid bare. She felt exposed, more naked than she'd been when bound to the headboard, her body trembling slightly as she waited for his response. But Julian's eyes softened, his hand tightening on her waist, pulling her closer until their bodies were pressed together, her breasts against his chest, her thighs straddling his. He cupped her face with both hands, his thumbs brushing away the hint of tears she hadn't realized were there, and shook his head, his expression fierce with love. "Emily," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you could never be too much. You're everything. The sweet, the wild, the gentle, the fierce every part of you is what I love. I don't want you to hide. not from me. I want you to be you, all of you, always." His words were a lifeline, a promise that wrapped around her heart, and he leaned in, kissing her deeply, his lips claiming hers with a hunger that was both tender and possessive. The kiss was a collision of need and trust, their tongues dancing in a slow, sensual rhythm that mirrored the jazz, their bodies moving together instinctively. Emily felt her fears melt away, replaced by a warmth that spread through her, a certainty that with Julian, she was safe to be her truest self. She pulled back, her lips swollen, her eyes locked on his, and smiled, a soft, radiant curve that lit up the room. "I love you," she whispered, the words a vow, a surrender, a celebration. "I love you," he echoed, his voice rough with emotion, his hands sliding up her back, tracing the curve of her spine, the touch both reverent and hungry. He kissed her again, his lips trailing from her mouth to her jaw, her neck, the hollow of her throat, each kiss a spark that reignited the fire between them. But this time, it was different, not just a chase for pleasure, but a conversation, a dialogue of bodies and souls, each touch a word, each sigh a sentence. Emily's hands roamed over his chest, her fingers tracing the hard planes of muscle, the faint scars from childhood adventures, the trail of hair that led lower. His skin was warm, taut, a canvas of strength and vulnerability that made her heart ache with love and her body throb with need. She leaned down, her lips brushing his collarbone, her tongue flicking against the sensitive skin, drawing a low moan from his lips that sent a jolt of heat through her. She kissed her way down his chest, her hands exploring, her nails lightly scraping his skin, each touch a declaration of her desire, each response from him a gift. Julian's hands found her hips, his fingers digging into the soft flesh, guiding her closer until she was straddling him fully, the lace of her panties pressing against the hard evidence of his desire. He groaned, his head falling back, his eyes half closed as he surrendered to the sensation, to her. He breathed, his voice thick with want. "You're driving me crazy." She smiled, a wicked glint in her eyes, and leaned down to kiss him again, her lips claiming his in a deep, hungry kiss that left them both breathless. Her body moved against his, a slow, deliberate rhythm that built the tension between them, the friction of lace and skin, a delicious torment. She felt powerful, alive, every movement a testament to her love, every response from him a mirror of her own desire. But then she paused, her lips hovering just above his, her breath warm against his skin. She felt a surge of emotion, a need to connect not just physically, but emotionally, to bridge the gap between their bodies and their hearts. "Julian," she whispered, her voice soft but urgent, "I need you to know this. Tonight, it's not just about what we're doing. It's about us, about trusting you, loving you, being us." He opened his eyes, his gaze locking on hers, and she saw the same truth reflected in his Isa, love that was as fierce as it was tender, a trust that was unshakable. He reached up, his hand cupping her face, his thumb brushing her lips. "I know," he said, his voice low and steady. "This isn't just sex, Em. It's us, talking without words, showing each other who we are. I've never felt closer to you than I do right now." The words were a spark, igniting a fire that burned away any lingering doubts. Emily leaned down, kissing him again, her lips soft but insistent, her body pressing against his, the lace of her panties a thin barrier that only heightened the anticipation. Their kisses grew hungrier, more desperate, a collision of need and love that left them both trembling. Julian's hands roamed over her, tracing the curve of her spine, the swell of her hips, the soft skin of her thighs, each touch a worship, a promise. She shifted, guiding him to sit up, their bodies pressed together, her legs wrapped around his waist. The position was intimate, vulnerable, their faces inches apart, their breaths mingling. She reached down, her fingers brushing against him, a teasing touch that drew a sharp intake of breath, his hips lifting instinctively. "Emily," he groaned, his voice rough with need, his hands tightening on her hips. She smiled, a soft, radiant curve that lit up the room, and leaned in, her lips brushing his ear. "I want you," she whispered, her voice a sultry promise. "All of you." The words were a confession, a demand, a vow, and they sent a thrill through him, his body responding with a heat that matched her own. Their movements became a dance, a rhythm of give and take, each touch a step deeper into the language of their love. Emily's hands guided him, her body moving with a confidence that was both bold and tender, her eyes locked on his, a silent conversation that spoke of trust, desire, and devotion. Julian's hands roamed over her, his fingers tracing the curves of her body, his lips kissing every inch of skin he could reach, each touch a declaration of his love, each sigh a testament to their connection. The candlelight cast their shadows against the wall, a tableau of intimacy and passion, their bodies intertwined in a way that was both primal and profound. Emily felt herself unraveling, not just in pleasure, but in love, in the certainty that with Julian, she could be everything sweet, wild, gentle, fierce, and everything in between. And Julian, his eyes burning with a love that was as fierce as it was tender, felt the same, his body and soul laid bare before her, a gift she cherished with every beat of her heart. As their movements grew more urgent, their breaths more ragged, Emily felt a wave of emotion crest within her, a mix of pleasure and love that was almost overwhelming. She clung to him, her nails digging into his shoulders, her lips finding his in a kiss that was both desperate and tender, a collision of everything they were. "Julian," she gasped, her voice a plea, a prayer, a promise. "Emily," he groaned, his voice thick with emotion, his hands tightening on her hips, guiding her, grounding her, loving her. And in that moment, as their bodies and souls merged in a crescendo of sensation and feeling, they were no longer just two people. They were one, bound by a love that was as wild as it was true, a love that transcended the physical to become something eternal. The candles burned lower, their light fading, but the glow of their connection remained, a beacon in the darkness. And as they moved together, lost in each other, Emily knew that this night, this moment, was a turning point, a moment when their love became not just a feeling, but a language, a story, a promise that would carry them forward, forever changed. The San Diego night had deepened, its velvet darkness pressing against the windows of Emily and Julian's apartment, the distant murmur of the city, now a faint lullaby. Inside, the bedroom was a sanctuary of fading candlelight, the once bright flames now mere embers, casting a soft, intimate glow that danced across the rumpled white linens of the bed. The air was warm, heavy with the lingering scents of jasmine, melted wax, and the raw primal musk of their shared passion, a fragrance that clung to their skin like a memory. The sultry jazz from the living room had faded to silence, replaced by the quiet rhythm of their breaths, the occasional creak of the bed, and the faint, soothing crash of waves from the nearby coast, a reminder of the world beyond their cocoon. Emily and Julian lay tangled in a single white sheet, their bodies pressed close, skin still flushed and glistening from the intensity of their earlier moments. The sheet draped loosely over them, clinging to the curves of Emily's body and the hard lines of Julian's, a delicate barrier that only heightened the intimacy of their closeness. Emily's head rested on his chest, her dark hair spilling across his skin like ink, her cheek pressed against the steady thrum of his heartbeat. Her body was a vision of radiant beauty, even in repose, her sun-kissed skin glowing faintly in the dim light, her curves soft yet powerful, the gentle swell of her breasts rising and falling with each breath. Her long, toned legs were entwined with his, her toes brushing his calf, and her hand rested lightly on his stomach, fingers tracing idle patterns on his warm, taut skin. Her obsidian eyes, half closed, glimmered with a quiet contentment, her lips still faintly crimson despite the hours of kisses curved into a soft, sated smile. Julian lay beneath her, one arm wrapped around her shoulders, his hand resting on the curve of her waist, fingers splayed possessively against her skin. His body was a study in strength and vulnerability, his lean, muscular frame relaxed but still radiating quiet power. His chest, dusted with a faint trail of dark hair, rose and fell with slow, deep breaths, the faint scars from childhood adventures catching the light like whispers of his past. His dark hair was tousled, a lock falling over his forehead, and his hazel eyes flecked with gold gazed down at Emily with a tenderness that made her heart ache. His strong jaw, shadowed with stubble, begged to be touched, and his lips, slightly parted, curved into a smile that was both boyish and profound, as if he were marveling at the woman in his arms. The room was quiet, but the silence was alive, filled with the unspoken weight of everything they'd shared, the confessions, the desires, the raw, unguarded truth of their love. The glass box on the nightstand, still holding a few unopened slips of paper, seemed to pulse with possibility, a reminder that their journey was far from over. But in this moment, they were content to simply be, to let the intensity of the night settle into something softer, deeper, a connection that transcended the physical to become something eternal. Julian's fingers moved gently, tracing the curve of Emily's spine, the touch light but deliberate, a caress that spoke of love rather than lust. He tilted his head, his lips brushing her forehead, and murmured, "You okay, Em?" His voice was low, rough from the hours of whispers and groans, but laced with a warmth that wrapped around her like a blanket. She nodded, her cheek brushing his chest, her smile widening as she nuzzled closer. "More than okay," she whispered, her voice soft but rich with emotion. "I feel like I'm floating." She lifted her head, propping herself up on one elbow to meet his gaze, her dark hair falling over one shoulder, framing her face in a cascade of midnight waves. Her eyes searched his, a mix of vulnerability and certainty, and she reached up, her fingers brushing the stubble on his jaw. "Tonight was everything, Julian. I've never felt so close to you." His smile deepened, a radiant curve that lit up the dim room, and he caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm, his lips warm and soft against her skin. "Same," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Tonight wasn't just about what we did. It was about us, about seeing you, really seeing you, in a way I've never seen before." His eyes held hers, fierce with love, and he leaned forward, his forehead resting against hers, their breaths mingling in the small space between them. "I got to meet a part of you I didn't know was there, Em, and I love it. I love you." The words were a spark, igniting a warmth that spread through her, a certainty that this moment, this night, was a turning point in their love. She felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming depth of her feelings, and she laughed softly, a sound that was both joyful and reverent. "You're going to make me cry," she teased, her voice trembling slightly, and she leaned in, kissing him gently, her lips brushing his in a slow, tender dance that spoke of love rather than desire. He chuckled, a low, rich sound that vibrated through her and pulled her closer, their bodies aligning perfectly, the sheet slipping lower to reveal the curve of her hip, the hard plane of his stomach. "No tears," he murmured, his lips brushing her temple, his hands sliding up her back to tangle in her hair. "Just us, right here, right now." His fingers moved through her hair, gentle and soothing, and he tilted her face up, his eyes searching hers. "You're my everything, Em. You know that, right?" She nodded, her throat tight with emotion, and nestled closer, her body molding to his, her leg draping over his thigh, her hand resting on his chest. "I know," she whispered, her voice barely audible, a confession meant only for him. "And you're mine." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of their shared history, their shared dreams, the love that had grown deeper with every moment of this night. They lay in silence for a while, the only sounds, the soft rustle of the sheet, the faint crackle of a dying candle, and the steady rhythm of their breaths. Emily's fingers continued their idle exploration of his skin, tracing the ridges of his abs, the curve of his ribs, each touch a quiet affirmation of her love. Julian's hand moved in slow, lazy circles on her back, his touch grounding her, anchoring her in the moment. The intensity of the night had ebbed, but the connection remained, a current that flowed between them, stronger than ever. After a time, Julian shifted, his hand sliding to her hip, his fingers brushing the edge of the sheet. "Come with me," he murmured, his voice a soft, inviting rumble. "Let's clean up." He sat up, pulling her with him, and she laughed, a bright, carefree sound that filled the room. His hand resting on the curve of her waist, fingers splayed possessively against her skin. His body was a study in strength and vulnerability, his lean, muscular frame relaxed, but still radiating quiet power. His chest, dusted with a faint trail of dark hair, rose and fell with slow, deep breaths, the faint scars from childhood adventures catching the light like whispers of his past. His dark hair was tousled, a lock falling over his forehead, and his hazel eyes, flecked with gold, gazed down at Emily with a tenderness that made her heart ache. His strong jaw, shadowed with stubble, begged to be touched, and his lips, slightly parted, curved into a smile that was both boyish and profound, as if he were marveling at the woman in his arms. The room was quiet, but the silence was alive, filled with the unspoken weight of everything they'd shared, the confessions, the desires, the raw, unguarded truth of their love. The glass box on the nightstand, still holding a few unopened slips of paper, seemed to pulse with possibility, a reminder that their journey was far from over. But in this moment, they were content to simply be, to let the intensity of the night settle into something softer, deeper, a connection that transcended the physical, to become something eternal. Julian's fingers moved gently, tracing the curve of Emily's spine, the touch light but deliberate, a caress that spoke of love rather than lust. He tilted his head, his lips brushing her forehead, and murmured, "You okay, Em?" His voice was low, rough from the hours of whispers and groans, but laced with a warmth that wrapped around her like a blanket. She nodded, her cheek brushing his chest, her smile widening as she nuzzled closer. "More than okay," she whispered, her voice soft but rich with emotion. "I feel like I'm floating." She lifted her head, propping herself up on one elbow to meet his gaze, her dark hair falling over one shoulder, framing her face in a cascade of midnight waves. Her eyes searched his, a mix of vulnerability and certainty, and she reached up, her fingers brushing the stubble on his jaw. "Tonight was everything, Julian. I've never felt so close to you." His smile deepened, a radiant curve that lit up the dim room, and he caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm, his lips warm and soft against her skin. "Same," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Tonight wasn't just about what we did. It was about us, about seeing you, really seeing you, in a way I've never seen before." His eyes held hers, fierce with love, and he leaned forward, his forehead resting against hers, their breaths mingling in the small space between them. "I got to meet a part of you I didn't know was there, Em, and I love it. I love you." The words were a spark, igniting a warmth that spread through her, a certainty that this moment, this night, was a turning point in their love. She felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness but from the overwhelming depth of her feelings, and she laughed softly, a sound that was both joyful and reverent. "You're going to make me cry," she teased, her voice trembling slightly, and she leaned in, kissing him gently, her lips brushing his in a slow, tender dance that spoke of love rather than desire. He chuckled, a low, rich sound that vibrated through her and pulled her closer, their bodies aligning perfectly, the sheet slipping lower to reveal the curve of her hip, the hard plane of his stomach. "No tears," he murmured, his lips brushing her temple, his hand sliding up her back to tangle in her hair. "Just us, right here, right now." His fingers moved through her hair, gentle and soothing, and he tilted her face up, his eyes searching hers. "You're my everything, Em. You know that, right?" She nodded, her throat tight with emotion, and nestled closer, her body molding to his, her leg draping over his thigh, her hand resting on his chest. "I know," she whispered, her voice barely audible, a confession meant only for him. "And you're mine." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of their shared history, their shared dreams, the love that had grown deeper with every moment of this night. They lay in silence for a while, the only sounds, the soft rustle of the sheet, the faint crackle of a dying candle, and the steady rhythm of their breaths. Emily's fingers continued their idle exploration of his skin, tracing the ridges of his abs, the curve of his ribs, each touch a quiet affirmation of her love. Julian's hand moved in slow, lazy circles on her back, his touch grounding her, anchoring her in the moment. The intensity of the night had ebbed, but the connection remained, a current that flowed between them, stronger than ever. After a time, Julian shifted, his hand sliding to her hip, his fingers brushing the edge of the sheet. "Come with me," he murmured, his voice a soft, inviting rumble. "Let's clean up." He sat up, pulling her with him, and she laughed, a bright, carefree sound that filled the room. As he scooped her into his arms, the sheet falling away to reveal their bare bodies, still warm and flushed from their earlier passion. He carried her to the bathroom, his steps steady, her arms wrapped around his neck, her cheek pressed against his shoulder. The bathroom was small but cozy, with a clawfoot tub that gleamed in the soft light of a single candle they'd brought with them. Julian set her down gently, her feet touching the cool tile, and turned on the faucet. The sound of running water, a soothing counterpoint to the quiet of the night. Steam began to rise, curling in the air, and he added a splash of lavender bath oil, the scent mingling with the warmth, creating an atmosphere of calm and intimacy. Emily watched him, her heart swelling with love as he tested the water, his movements careful, deliberate, a quiet act of care that meant as much as any grand gesture. His body was a masterpiece in the dim light, this broad shoulders tapering to a narrow waist, his muscles flexing with each movement, his skin glowing with a faint sheen of sweat. She stepped closer, her hands resting on his back, her fingers tracing the curve of his spine, and he turned, his eyes meeting hers, a smile playing on his lips. "Get in," he said, his voice low and teasing, as he stepped into the tub, the water lapping at his thighs, his body a vision of strength and grace. He held out a hand, and she took it, stepping into the warm water, a soft sigh escaping her lips as the heat enveloped her. They sank down together, the tub just big enough for them to fit, their bodies pressed close, her back against his chest, his arms wrapped around her, his hands resting on her stomach. The water was a balm, soothing the lingering ache in their muscles, washing away the intensity of the night to leave only the quiet, profound connection between them. Emily leaned back, her head resting on his shoulder, her dark hair fanning out in the water, her body relaxed but alive with the awareness of his touch. Julian's hands moved gently, tracing lazy patterns on her skin, his fingers brushing the curve of her waist, the soft skin of her thighs, each touch a whisper of love, a reminder of their closeness. "This feels perfect," she murmured, her voice soft, almost dreamlike, as she tilted her head to meet his gaze. Her eyes were warm, glowing with a contentment that came from knowing she was exactly where she belonged. Like, "We're in our own little world." "We are," he whispered, his lips brushing her temple, his voice thick with emotion. "Just you and me, Em. Always." His hands moved higher, cupping her breasts gently, his thumbs brushing her skin in a way that was tender rather than arousing, a touch that spoke of intimacy rather than desire. She sighed, her body melting into his, her hands resting on his thighs, feeling the strength beneath her fingers, the warmth of his skin. They sat in silence for a while, the only sounds the soft lap of water, the faint crackle of the candle, and the steady rhythm of their breaths. Emily felt a profound sense of peace, a certainty that this night had changed them, deepened their love in ways she couldn't yet fully articulate. She turned slightly, her lips brushing his jaw, and whispered, "I feel like we're starting over, like we're falling in love all over again, but deeper, truer." Julian's arms tightened around her, his lips curving into a smile against her skin. "That's exactly what it feels like," he murmured, his voice low and reverent. "Like I'm seeing you for the first time, but also like I've known you forever." He tilted her face up, his eyes searching hers, and kissed her gently, a slow, lingering kiss that spoke of promises kept and promises yet to come. The kiss deepened for a moment, a spark of the earlier fire flaring between them, but they pulled back, content to let the moment remain soft, tender, a quiet celebration of their love. Emily nestled closer, her body fitting perfectly against his, her head resting on his chest, her ear pressed against his heartbeat. Julian's hands continued their gentle exploration, tracing the curves of her body, his touch a constant reminder of his love, his presence a steady anchor in the storm of their emotions. As the water cooled, they lingered, reluctant to leave the warmth, the intimacy of the moment. But eventually, Julian stirred, his lips brushing her shoulder. "Come on," he murmured, his voice soft but playful. "Let's get you dried off." He stood, water cascading down his body, his muscles gleaming in the candlelight, and stepped out of the tub, grabbing a plush towel from the rack. Emily followed, her movements slow, languid, her body still humming with the afterglow of their night. She stepped onto the bath mat, and Julian wrapped the towel around her, his hands gentle as he dried her skin, his touch lingering on her shoulders, her waist, her thighs. She watched him, her heart swelling with love, as he cared for her, his movements careful, reverent, a quiet act of devotion that meant as much as any passionate embrace. He dried himself next, the towel moving over his body in quick, efficient strokes, and Emily couldn't help but admire the hard lines of his muscles, the strength in his frame, the vulnerability in his eyes as he caught her watching. She stepped closer, taking the towel from his hands, and began to dry his chest, her movements slow, deliberate, a mirror of his care for her. "My turn," she teased, her voice soft but playful, and he laughed, a low, warm sound that filled the room. When they were dry, they returned to the bedroom, the air now cool against their skin, the candles nearly extinguished. Julian pulled a fresh sheet from the linen closet, and they remade the bed together, their movements synchronized, a quiet dance of domesticity that felt as intimate as their earlier passion. They climbed back into bed, pulling the sheet over them, their bodies pressed close, her head on his chest, his arm around her shoulders. As they lay there, the world outside forgotten, Emily felt a sense of completeness, a certainty that this night had rewritten the story of their love. She tilted her head, her lips brushing his jaw, and whispered, "Thank you, Julian, for tonight, for everything." He smiled, his fingers brushing her hair, his voice a soft, reverent murmur. "Thank you, Em, for being you, for loving me." He kissed her forehead, his lips lingering, and they fell into a comfortable silence, their bodies and hearts entwined, the night wrapping around them like a promise. The candles flickered out, leaving them in darkness, but the glow of their love remained, a light that would carry them forward, forever changed, forever bound. The San Diego dawn crept softly into Emily and Julian's apartment, its pale light filtering through the gauzy curtains, casting a gentle glow across the bedroom. The candles had long since burned out, leaving behind only the faint scent of wax and jasmine, now mingled with the fresh, briny tang of the ocean breeze that slipped through a cracked window. The room was quiet, the only sounds the soft rustle of the white sheet draped over their bodies, and the distant rhythmic crash of waves against the shore, a soothing reminder of the world waking beyond their walls. The bed, its linen still warm from their closeness, bore the imprint of their night that had unraveled them, rebuilt them, and left them forever changed. Emily lay curled against Julian, her body nestled into the curve of his, her head resting on his chest, her dark hair spilling across his skin like a cascade of midnight. Her sun-kissed skin glowed faintly in the dawn light, her curves soft yet powerful, the gentle swell of her breasts pressed against his side, her long, toned legs entwined with his. Her hand rested lightly on his stomach, fingers tracing idle patterns on his warm, taut skin, a quiet act of intimacy that spoke louder than words. Her obsidian eyes, half closed, shimmered with a mix of contentment and curiosity, her lips still faintly crimson despite the hours of kisses curved into a soft, secretive smile, as if she were guarding a delicious secret. Her body was a vision of radiant beauty, every curve and contour a testament to her strength, her vulnerability, her allure, a woman who could command a heart with a single glance. Julian lay beneath her, one arm wrapped around her shoulders, his hand resting on the curve of her waist, fingers splayed possessively against her skin. His lean, muscular frame was relaxed, but his presence still radiated quiet power, a storm held in check by the tenderness in his touch. His chest, dusted with a faint trail of dark hair, rose and fell with slow, deep breaths, the faint scars from childhood adventures catching the light like whispers of his past. His dark hair was tousled, a lock falling over his forehead, and his hazel eyes, flecked with gold, gazed down at Emily with a love that was both fierce and gentle, a look that could melt hearts and ignite dreams. His strong jaw, shadowed with stubble, begged to be touched, and his lips, slightly parted, curved into a smile that was both boyish and profound, as if he were marveling at the woman in his arms and the night they'd shared. The air between them was alive, charged with the weight of everything they'd confessed, explored, and discovered, the desires written on slips of paper, the trust forged in moments of surrender, the love that had grown deeper, wilder, truer. The glass box on the nightstand, still holding a handful of unopened slips, gleamed faintly in the dawnlight, its contents a tantalizing promise of more secrets, more adventures, more pieces of themselves yet to be revealed. The night had been a journey, a revelation, a rewriting of their love, but as the dawn broke, it was clear that their story was far from over. Emily stirred, her cheek brushing Julian's chest, her smile widening as she tilted her head to meet his gaze. Emily and Julian looked at each other, their eyes locked, a shared understanding passing between Thema's certainty that their love had been transformed not just by the night, but by the courage to be their truest selves, to embrace every facet of their desire, their trust, their heart. As the dawn brightened, painting the room in hues of gold and pink, Emily nestled closer, her body molding to his, her head resting on his chest, her ear pressed against his heartbeat. Julian's arm tightened around her, his fingers brushing her hair, his lips curving into a smile that was both tender and wicked, a promise of more to come. They didn't speak, didn't need to. The silence was alive with their love, their anticipation, the unspoken question of what lay ahead. The glass box gleamed, its secrets waiting, and as the world outside began to stir, Emily and Julian lay in their cocoon, their love a beacon in the dawn, a story unfinished, a journey just beginning. What desires lay hidden in those unopened slips? What new adventures would their next No Limits night bring? The answers were out there, waiting to be discovered, a tantalizing mystery that hung in the air like a whisper, beckoning them forward. And for those listening, those captivated by the fire of their love, the story doesn't end here. The next chapter, the next No Limits night, is coming a tale of passion, trust, and secrets yet to be unveiled. Stay tuned, because Emily and Julian's journey is far from over, and the next slip of paper might just change everything. Check back on my channel for the continuation, where the flames of their love burn even brighter, and the mysteries of the glass box come to light. Don't miss it. The next No Limits night is waiting.